Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Robert Dorgan. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Robert Kevin Dorgan was born in 1969 and eventually lived in the state of Maine. He enlisted in the Marine Corps on April 26, 1988. On July 13 of that same year, he was discharged. One possible reason for a quick discharge like this would be having character incongruent with Marine Corps expectations and standards. In 1989, Robert was charged with simple assault and battery, but the charge was later dismissed. In 1992, he married a woman named Rhonda Dorgan in Rehoboth, Massachusetts. Rhonda's last name was Dorgan prior to being married. Robert and Rhonda were first cousins once removed. Eventually, the couple had 3 children, Aiden, Colin, and Ava. Robert also had a daughter named Amanda from another relationship. At some point, years later, Robert became transgender and used the names Roberta Dorgan and Roberta Esposito. He said that he had undergone gender reassignment surgery. In February 2020, there were several key events in Robert's life. His wife Rhonda filed for divorce. She cited his gender reassignment surgery and his narcissistic and personality disorder traits as grounds for divorce. Rhonda crossed out this reason on the form and wrote irreconcilable differences which have caused the immediate breakdown of the marriage. That same month, February 2020, Robert accused his mother, Joanne Dorgan, of assaulting him in a violent, threatening, or tumultuous manner. She allegedly showed up to a high school hockey game and punched Robert in the face and said, "I want you to hit me so I can have you arrested." Joanne was charged with simple assault and battery and disorderly conduct. A couple of weeks later, still in February, Robert accused his father-in-law, Gerald Dorgan, of threatening to have him murdered by an Asian street gang if he did not move out. Robert had lived with Rhonda for 7 years in Gerald's home on Wentworth Drive in North Providence, Rhode Island. Gerald did not want Robert to be there because Robert was transgender. Gerald was charged with intimidation of witnesses and victims of crimes and obstruction of the judicial system. Later in 2020, Robert moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and worked as a truck driver. The charges against Joanne and Gerald were dismissed because Robert no longer wished to pursue the charges. In June 2021, Robert's divorce from Rhonda was finalized. In 2022, Robert moved to Maine and worked for a shipbuilder in the city of Bath. He made this move to be closer to family members. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Monday, February 16, 2026, Robert's 17-year-old son, Colin Dorgan, was playing at a high school hockey game at the Dennis M. Lynch Arena in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Colin was the captain of the Blackstone Valley Schools hockey team. The game started at 2 p.m. At 2:28 p.m., Robert Dorgan, who was wearing female clothing, approached a group of people who were sitting in the second row watching the game. This group included his ex-wife, Rhonda Dorgan, his son, Aiden Dorgan, Rhonda's parents, Gerald and Linda Dorgan, a friend of Rhonda named Thomas Caruso, Robert's daughter, Amanda, and Amanda's 2 children. Colin was on the ice playing hockey at this time. Robert Dorgan was armed with 2 pistols, a Glock semi-automatic pistol chambered in 10mm auto, and a Sig Sauer P226. The police have not indicated the caliber of the P226. 4 different calibers are available for that weapon. Robert walked next to the group and produced one of the pistols. The police did not indicate which one. Without saying a word, he pointed the pistol at the group and fired about 13 shots in 6 seconds. A few spectators immediately intervened and tried to stop Robert. One of those spectators was named Michael Black. During an interview with the media after the shooting, Michael said that he grabbed Robert's pistol and his left hand became stuck in the slide of the weapon. Robert was trying to pull the trigger, but the weapon would not fire. Robert pushed Michael off him, but other people grabbed Robert and Robert fell backward. As Michael went down to put his knee on him, Robert retrieved another pistol with his left hand. Michael started yelling, "There's another gun. There's a second gun." Robert used this second pistol to deliver a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. This happened 11 seconds after Robert stopped firing at the group. At 2:30 p.m., the police arrived at the arena just 2 minutes after they were called. They found 56-year-old Robert Dorgan and 52-year-old Grande Dorgan dead at the scene. 23-year-old Aidan Dorgan was transported to a hospital where he died. Gerald and Linda Dorgan, both age 75, and 54-year-old Thomas Caruso were transported to a hospital in critical condition. Robert's son Colin, his daughter Amanda, and Amanda's 2 children were not harmed. Amanda would later tell the police that Michael Black's heroic actions saved her life because Robert was getting ready to shoot her when Michael intervened and grabbed the pistol. As far as what motivated the attack, Amanda said that Robert had a vendetta against the family members. At the time I am making this video, the circumstances surrounding the shooting are under investigation. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. As I mentioned, Robert Dorgan identified as transgender and used the names Roberta Dorgan and Roberta Esposito. One coworker said that Robert appeared to be divided about his transgender identity. Sometimes he was proud of it, but at other times he was embarrassed. Another coworker indicated that Robert had a bad temper and would engage in screaming matches with colleagues. Robert was active on social media and posted many images of himself. Based on his posts, it appeared as though he was attracted to women and loved motorcycles, fast cars, warships, military aircraft, and tractor-trailers. Often in cases where a man identifies as a woman, one would expect to see him dress and behave in a feminine manner. That wasn't really Robert's style exactly. His look was atypical and creative. He appeared to have a lot of stereotypically masculine traits, and often made posts consistent with the maturity and preferences of a teenage male as opposed to a 56-year-old female. For example, he was fascinated with genitalia and flatulence. Item number 2. As far as his political beliefs, Robert supported gun rights, immigration and customs enforcement, and was a fan of Donald Trump. In 2017, he wrote on social media, quote, "This country needs more people with blanks to tell it like it is. That's why Trump got elected," unquote. In 2024, Robert wrote, quote, "Trans my whole life, post-operation, back Trump 100%, love America," unquote. And in 2025, he wrote, quote, "Trump will have his own Rushmore. I call it Trumpmore," unquote. Robert often posted anti-Semitic and racist rhetoric. He had a neo-Nazi tattoo on his right arm and made repeated references to white power and white pride worldwide. On the day before the murders, he posted an anti-Asian slur when replying to a video that was praising Hitler. Also on this day, he replied to an anti-trans post saying, quote, "Keep bashing us, but do not wonder why we go berserk," unquote. Item number 3. There have been several cases that I've covered recently involving transgender mass shooters. Some people worry this trend will cause fear and reinforce negative stereotypes about the transgender community. Every time there's another transgender perpetrator, it creates an association between the transgender ideology and shooting, even though this is not a causal relationship. Being transgender does not cause a person to be violent. Two variables can be associated without one causing the other. The case of Robert Dorgan might seem like more bad news for those who are transgender, especially because he specifically invoked the idea that criticism directed at transgender people could result in violence. Again, he said, "Keep bashing us, but do not wonder why we go berserk." I can appreciate why members of the transgender community would be concerned about being stigmatized based on Robert's behavior. However, it's pretty clear that he was not a typical transgender person. He was not representative of transgender people as a whole. Robert may have been serious about his goal of becoming a woman, but his antisocial stance placed him in a category of his own, rather than as a typical transgender person. The actions of one violent individual should never define an entire group. Item number 4, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Robert was self-centered, grandiose, excitement-seeking, immature, angry, violent, had extremist views, had a sense of entitlement, and was exceedingly creepy. It's not clear what he was trying to accomplish by adopting the transgender ideology. Did he really want to be a woman? Was this something he did for shock value? Was he trying to create a novel persona so he would stand out? Was all this for attention? There's no way to know. Robert was very confused and sometimes embarrassed by his transgender identity. There was a lot of second-guessing, Perhaps he wasn't too sure. Robert would frequently talk about his children to his coworkers. He appeared to be proud of his children. He attended many hockey games without incident. Nobody expected there to be violence on the day of the shooting. The family members did not have any warning, or at least sufficient warning, this was going to happen. Robert selected a time and place for his attack, which gave him access to several family members simultaneously. They were all sitting in a row and vulnerable to attack. Robert was not interested in any type of negotiation with his victims. He opened fire without saying a word. The only message he wanted to communicate was death. By targeting family members in a crowded ice rink, Robert gave himself essentially no chance of escaping. His plan from the beginning was to die after the attack. Now moving to my final thoughts. There have been several high-profile mass shootings in recent times involving transgender perpetrators. In the beginning, the media tended to use the pronouns preferred by the offenders, but that trend has shifted over the last few attacks. In the case of Robert Dorgan, many media outlets referred to him as he. They didn't even try calling him she. There's the sense that the media is responding to outrage by the public to accurately describe the biology of the perpetrators. It's not the job of the media to promote the transgender ideology, only to report the news. Those are my thoughts in the case of Robert Dorgan. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. One thing I find interesting about the case of Robert Dorgan is how he supplies so many possible reasons that he could have been a mass killer. Like, after these mass shootings, people look at the characteristics of the offender and they say, because this person was this or that, we have the reason for the attack. So they might look at Robert and say, he conducted that attack because he had that neo-Nazi tattoo. Or he conducted the attack because he was racist, or because he was transgender, or because he supported Donald Trump, or because he liked military aircraft. Who knows? They can take any characteristic and say, this must have explained why he's a killer, right? He liked guns. He liked warships. Like, there's just so many factors packed into one person when looking at Robert Dorgan. He was very expressive, and as I mentioned, creative in his look. He had a unique style. Not one that would have made him too popular, I think, but many people did like him, so who knows. But either way, Robert was a complex guy, and if people are looking for a simple attribute to connect to the shooting, he offered many. They can just pick the one they want. I also find it interesting that not all the attributes are on the same side of the political spectrum. Again, on one side, he was transgender. On the other side, he was pro-gun and pro-Donald Trump. So it's not even to where all the factors can be packed together and say, well, they all point to one political side, so that must be to blame. Robert was far more complex than that. He couldn't be contained in just one broad category. I think the word confusing fits pretty well for Robert's life. There were also reports that he had financial problems. I wonder if that might have motivated him. But either way, he just kind of went through life not really having a sense of direction, just kind of almost random. And a lot of people picked up on that, describing him as confused and disoriented. They also described him as clearly troubled by other factors in his life, like maybe mental health concerns were something that he was dealing with. Either way, I just thought this case was interesting because of all the characteristics that were packed into one individual. Sometimes there isn't a easy explanation for why somebody carried out an attack. There is no motive that can be quickly identified. People have a lot of different personality factors. They have a lot of different stressors weighing on them, and these can combine in ways that lead to violence. It's not always possible to look at a person and just take their obvious characteristics and connect them to the mass shooting. The answers are usually a lot more difficult to find than that.